Story 1. I was the one insulted but not the one with the comeback. I was out with a coworker and her friends, and my buddy and I were leaving a little too early for her sensibilities. She jokingly got up in my face and said, "Smell that? Smells like a scared person." A guy playing at the pool table next to us stepped forward and said, "I'm sorry. That must be me. I just ate. It was amazing." Story 2. In the city once, I heard two guys get into a fight about something dumb. One guy screams, "Your mother's a fucking slut." And the other screams back, "Your mother's an excellent cook." And the first guy's brain paused, and that was that. Story 3. My friend from high school had vitiligo all over his entire body. Well, anyway, we were playing basketball when someone on the other team called him a Dalmatian. And Chachi says, "Don't be mad. I got the better of your mom 101 times. It was so funny." Story 4. Best one I heard was out on the town in Dublin, Ireland years ago. Some bloke yelled, "You're a whore," at some girl. Cut right through the music. She clapped back super fast with, "And I still wouldn't have intercourse with you." Been a go-to for me since then as a comeback. Story 5. Customer at a bar, to the bartender, "If you lost 20 pounds, I'd ask you on a date." Bartender to customer, "If I gained 20 pounds, would you never talk to me again?" Story 6. After reading these, I'm anxious to get into a verbal altercation, so I can be insulted and awkwardly forget what I was supposed to say to utterly embarrass the offending party. Story 7. Absolutely silly schoolyard stuff from grammar school. A kid was making fun of me for wearing glasses, so I pulled them off and yelled, "At least I can take them off, but you're always ugly." Story 8. My best friend and I, after an argument with a kid from our school in a shop, began walking away down the street. Kid, "Where are you going, coward?" Friend, "Your mom's house." Kid, "My mom lives the other way, idiot." Friend, "No, I meant your real mom." Story 9. I was pregnant and went out to swim in a bathing suit, and my husband's friend said, "Wow, you look like you've eaten a lot of pasta." And I replied, "I'm 6 months pregnant. What's your excuse?" They're no longer friends. Story 10. Once I heard someone respond to an insult with, "I could agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong." It was so quick and clever, it left the room stunned. Story 11. A dude in my class called out a semi-friend of mine that people are talking behind his back. In fact, that wasn't the case as far as I know, and that guy said, "Well, you know what they say about you? Nothing, nobody cares." Story 12. It's got to be the Aliens locker room scene for me. Hudson says, "Hey Vasquez, have you ever been mistaken for a man?" Vasquez responds, "No, have you?" Story 13. A workmate playfully asked our manager if he had purchased his pink tie at a gay bar gift shop. The manager retorted, "Yes, and I told them I knew you, and they gave me a discount." That was awesome because this particular workmate is usually the quickest wit. The manager shut him down instantly. Story 14. I was playing Call of Duty, and some lad was talking about how all the girls and female teachers at his school wanted to engage with him in a vulgar manner. Someone else on voice chat said, "So, what's it like being homeschooled?" Story 15. So there were two girls fighting, and one of them looks at my sister, who was minding her own business, and says, "You go to hell too." My sister responded, "Do you want me to say anything to your mom?" Story 16. Someone was insulting someone else's sartorial choices. I think it was a hat, maybe a shirt, and they fired back with, "It gives me magical powers to mind my own business." I saw it somewhere on the internet, probably Reddit, and have used it in real life. Story 17. A guy on our bus in high school was a complete jerk. He was always saying degrading things to the girls and being all around mean to everyone. One day he said to me, "Jerk me off." I responded with, "I don't have a microscope and a pair of tweezers." Story 18. I told my teenage sister-in-law something, and she hit me with the following. Her, "Oh my God, when?" Me, "What? Ha." Her, "When did I ask?" I was astonished. All I could do was silently walk away, laughing out loud. Story 19. My mother worked in a dialysis clinic when I was little, and she'd bring me into work a lot. One day when I was about 4, my mom brought me onto the floor to introduce me to her patients. It was the first time the floor was full. There was one man in his 90s who shook my hand. He looked up at my mom and said, "She's beautiful." My mom got all flattered and said, "Thank you." Then he looked at me before looking back at my mom and asking, "Is she adopted?" Story 20. On an Indian roast show, there were 2 bald twin brothers, and the roaster told them, "You two confuse me on a biological level. You two look like testicles, but you are both assholes. I am still waiting for an opportunity to use that." Story 21. During class in high school, the guy who liked to bully me kept calling me gay. This had been going on for weeks when I finally snapped and said, "You must be gay also, and I'm assuming you keep hitting on me. It's the only reason why I think you won't leave me alone." He kept stammering something while his friends were howling. I then ended with, "I'm not gay, but if I was, sorry, you're not my type." That was the last he bullied me. Story 22. Back in 2020, I was walking along the waterfront with a friend. We were wearing masks for COVID, and some unmasked guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, are you a doctor? Because I've got this funky-looking fungus on my penis I want you to look at." Me, without missing a beat, replied, "Yeah, actually I'm an amputation specialist. Let me go get my snips and I'll sort that out for you." I've never seen a grin disappear so fast. Story 23. I was in a bus of rowdy Marines, and some brainless frat brother was whining about the girls he couldn't get and said, "I don't engage with overweight girls." I didn't even mean to. I just blurted out, "Overweight girls don't engage with you." Oh, the cacophony of hooting testosterone-addled howler monkeys that reverberated off the van walls. I've been riding that high ever since. Not really that inventive or smart, but Marines have low standards. Story 24. I have a flat chest, and a group of boys made fun of my looks, apparently trying to be funny. They claimed they were not planning to be hateful, but their humor seemed to bring others down. They also joked about my necklace, which was hanging in the area between my chest, and I tried to hide the area with my jacket because it made me uncomfortable. A big guy who was overweight said that there is no use in hiding something because there is nothing to hide. I replied that he is just jealous because he has bigger breasts than me. I know it was petty, but at that point, I was close to crying, and he was stunned. Story 25. I was being a smart aleck and told one of my coworkers, "If I wanted any lip from you, I'd unzip my pants." It got a pretty good laugh, but when he immediately responded, "I don't eat baby food," everyone utterly lost it. Story 26. I was friends with a couple of guys who happened to be cousins to each other. One day, they got into an argument. I can't remember the actual insult that was thrown, but the reply was, "The best thing your daddy could have done was to roll over and shoot you on the wall." Story 27. Since I saw someone else comment with a movie quote, my favorite is this one from Rent. In response to a character being transphobic, "I'm more of a woman than you'll ever have, and more of a man than you'll ever be." Story 28. The story they have been talking about regarding Kamala this week is entertaining. In the first meeting of the Senate Intelligence Committee in 2017, then Chairman Richard Burr, a Republican from North Carolina, was going around the room to introduce new members when he reached Harris. Burr struggled to pronounce her first name, according to people familiar with the meeting. "I know you told me how to pronounce it," he apologized. "Oh well, I'll just call you Senator Harris." Harris, who had been a senator for only a few days at that point, responded, "No problem. I'll just call you Dick." Story 29. I was at a mixed table at my brother's wedding. His wife's grandmother and grandfather were at the same table. Her grandmother was fussing over everyone seated, making sure we all got enough food. The grandmother said, "Did everyone get gravy? Peter, do you have enough carrots? You, son, do you want another roll?" The grandfather remarked, "Long time since I've heard that." Story 30. I live in New Orleans, and we are big on costuming events, even outside Mardi Gras or things outsiders might traditionally associate with costuming. I was going to an Easter-themed pub crawl, but first meeting a friend at a very high-end restaurant for some champagne. I was dressed for my pub crawl, had on a get-up with ears. Pretty sexy, but nothing out of the box for New Orleans. Well, as I am walking in the quarter to meet my friend for champagne, there is a group of what I would term boys with questionable intentions across the street. Obviously tourists holding hand grenades, wearing beads, looked like fraternity brothers, and probably just 21. One of them yelled out at me, "Hey, are you a hooker?" I am a biostatistician, but I do not think it is his numbers he wanted crunched, so without breaking stride, I just gave a big thumbs up. He followed up with "How much?" to which I yelled, "If you have to ask, you cannot afford it." And the howling that came from his friends as I heard him attempt to sputter a response warms me at night. Story 31. Backstory. I dated this guy, non-seriously, for a few months. I found out he had a long-term girlfriend when I ran into them both at a train station. Long story short, the girl hates me and they're still together. I left and blocked him as soon as possible. We run into each other often, and he and his girlfriend are always making snarky comments. I usually just tell them to back off, but recently, I ran into them on a train. They noticed me sitting while they got off and they made a comment. I replied to both, "Sorry, I don't have any change. I live in a big city. People ask for change daily." Her jaw dropped and she just started walking away. I haven't seen them since. Story 32. My girlfriend and I were jokingly arguing over whether or not a shirt looked good. Me, "I'm sorry. I think we're just going to have to agree that I have much better taste than you do." Her, "You're right. After all, you're dating me and I'm dating you." Story 33. My go-to in online gaming when someone says, "You suck," is "not as much as your husband." The possibilities. 1. If the insulter is male, uncomfortable with their sexuality and homophobic, thus they are inflamed by the suggestion that they are in fact married to a man, and hopefully learn not to insult people on the internet. 2. If the insulter is male, not homophobic, and comfortable with their sexuality, at which point they likely lean into the insult, and now we are just being some silly guys online and the tension is diffused. 3. If the insulter is male and homosexual, at which point I have now complimented their husband. The tension is diffused. 4. If the insulter is female, insecure, and heterosexual, at which point I have suggested their husband actually likes men, and they are now inflamed and hopefully learn not to insult people on the internet. 5. If the insulter is female and non-heteronormative, at which point the absurdity leads to interesting conversation. The tension is diffused. It is always a win. Story 34. My friend and I were at the beach. My friend has a chubby physique, but he owns it. While walking past 3 teenage girls, they shouted, "You, he's so fat." My friend responded with a loud, prolonged fart. The girls looked confused and shocked, and they all fell silent. I still laugh at this today. Story 35. Menswear guy on Twitter has had some excellent comebacks, but this one is his best in my opinion. Reply, dude. That's just a complete lack of understanding of human nature. Women instinctively present themselves. Men instinctively demonstrate themselves. Both are done to attract mates. Menswear guy, your bio says you're an aquatic plant scientist. Did you choose this profession because you thought women wanted to have sex with an aquatic plant scientist? Story 36. Family dinner one weekend. Dad has been his usual difficult self all day. Grandma makes a cake for everyone. She has a bite during dessert and it goes down wrong. She starts coughing. Dad says, "Cake a little dry, is it?" Grandma ignores it. Later, Dad is ranting about the neighborhood garage sale going on. Dad, cars parked everywhere. People wandering onto lawns. Absolute brain-dead morons throwing their money away on stuff people should just throw away. It's a supermarket for the stupid. Grandma, so, what did you end up buying? Dead silence, then laughter. Dad got up and left the table. Still miss you to this day, you legend of a grandmother. Story 37. Not an insult, but I've always prided myself on this comeback. I was talking to my husband's college roommate. I was ranting about some girl who was being very mean. Me, she was such a jerk. Roommate, Really, just meerkats? Can a woman be a jerk? Me. Men can be cowards, can't they? It shocked him into silence, which was really hard to do. He was really witty, and I was never quick enough to clap back at his remarks. Story 38. Go ahead and call me a major nerd, but this one is from Downton Abbey. One character tells one of the Crawley sisters that she will never see him again, and without missing a beat, Maggie Smith's character says, "Do you promise?" Story 39. Local radio personality, who thought he was very confident and impressive, was harassing an attractive young lady. It culminated with him saying he would like to get in her pants. Quick as a flash, she replied, "No thanks. One inappropriate person is enough." Story 40. Billy Clanton. Why? It's the drunk piano player. You're so drunk you can't hit nothing. In fact, you're probably seeing double. Doc, I have 2 guns, one for each of you. Story 41. I was working in a building next to Planned Parenthood, so our team was constantly going to the truck and back to the worksite. There was one particularly aggressive and uneducated woman who would yell at us every time we crossed their blockade. Finally, this woman yelled in my face, "How old do you think babies should be before we prevent their murder?" I'm not a particularly humorous guy, but somehow I was inspired that day and asked, "I don't know, how old are you?" Silence, with her mouth agape, was her response. Story 42. Best one I have ever come up with in the moment. The woman who slept with my husband had also slept with his brother. She and I were yelling at each other after I found out, and she told me, "Forget you." I replied, "You have had enough involvement with members of this family, don't you think?" And I am still proud of that years later. Story 43. I like a good highbrow retort. Nothing too complicated or crude. Delivered in a forum where you normally have to be gracious and diplomatic can make it absolutely brutal. My favorite is probably an old one from my world leader and another. When Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau learned that Richard Nixon had insulted him, he responded, "I have been called worse things by better people.